The bells of the convent of Santa Elisabetta had fallen silent hours ago, their bronze tongues frozen in the grip of an unseasonable frost that descended upon the Sicilian hills like a curse. Sister Serafina pressed her palm against the frigid windowpane of the infirmary, watching ice crystals form patterns that reminded her of the lace her grandmother used to weave before arthritis claimed her fingers. Outside, the olive groves that surrounded the convent groaned under the weight of the cold, their ancient branches creaking warnings into the night. She had been unable to sleep, drawn to the medical supplies room by an inexplicable restlessness that made her chest tight with unnamed dread. The other sisters often teased her about her intuition, how she always seemed to know when someone needed help before they asked. Tonight, that intuition screamed. Thunder rolled across the valley despite the clear sky, an impossible sound that made her rosary beads click against each other as her hand trembled. She was about to return to her cell when she heard it, the grinding scrape of metal against stone, coming from the convent's rear entrance, the one they used for deliveries, and hadn't opened in 3 days. Her bare feet made no sound on the cold stone floor as she moved through the corridors, past the dormitory, where 20 sisters slept in peaceful ignorance. The wooden door at the end of the hallway stood ajar, moonlight slicing through the gap like a silver blade. And there, silhouetted against the ethereal glow, stood a figure that didn't belong. He was massive, not just tall, but built like someone who had fought for every inch of space he occupied in this world. His left hand gripped the doorframe, while his right pressed against his ribs, dark liquid seeping between his fingers and dripping onto the threshold in a steady rhythm. His breathing came in controlled bursts, the kind of discipline that spoke of someone accustomed to pain but refusing to surrender to it. "You need to leave," Serafina heard herself say, though her voice barely rose above the wind whistling through the open door. "This is a sacred place." The man lifted his head, and she saw his face properly for the first time. Angular features carved by hardship, a jaw shadowed with several days of stubble, and eyes, God help her eyes, the color of dark amber that seemed to burn straight through her habit and into her soul. A cut ran from his left eyebrow to his cheekbone, fresh enough that blood still traced its path like tears. "Can't," he said, the single word carrying an accent she couldn't place, not quite Italian, tinged with something Eastern European. "They're watching the hospitals, the clinics, everywhere except—" He gestured vaguely at the cross mounted above the door, a bitter smile twisting his lips. "Who looks for the devil in God's house?" "You're bleeding," she stated unnecessarily, her medical training overriding her common sense. The spreading stain on his white dress shirt had grown from the size of her fist to nearly covering his entire right side. "Observant for a nun," he said. Then his knees buckled. Serafina moved without thinking, catching him before he could fall completely. He was heavier than she expected, solid muscle beneath the expensive fabric of his clothes. This close, she could smell gunpowder mixing with cologne, something dark and woody that made her stomach perform an uncomfortable flip. "The infirmary," she said, making a decision that would haunt her later. Quickly. "Lysander," he said as she helped him walk, his weight making each step a struggle. "My name is Lysander Volkov." She didn't offer her name in return. Names created connections, and connections with men who appeared at convent doors bleeding from gunshot wounds were dangerous things. Yet as she guided him through the shadowed hallways, she couldn't ignore how his arm felt around her shoulders, or how his breath warmed her neck when he leaned close. The infirmary was modest 6 beds with white sheets, a medicine cabinet, and basic surgical supplies for the elderly sister's various ailments. She helped him onto the nearest bed, trying not to notice how his muscles tensed under her touch. "The shirt," she said, reaching for scissors. "I need to see the wound." He unbuttoned it himself with steady fingers, despite the pain etched across his features. The fabric parted to reveal a torso that told stories in scars, some old and white, others pink and recent. But what drew her attention wasn't the bullet wound just below his ribs, or the intricate Orthodox cross tattooed over his heart. It was the constellation of cigarette burns across his abdomen, deliberate and numerous, speaking of torture rather than battle. "Don't look so shocked, sister," Lysander said, watching her face with those unsettling amber eyes. "We all carry our sins differently. Mine just happened to be visible." She worked in silence, cleaning the wound with practiced efficiency. The bullet had passed through cleanly, a small mercy in this night of impossibilities. As she prepared the suture, her fingers brushed against his skin, and she felt him inhale sharply. Not from pain, she realized with a start, but from something else entirely. "Why did you really come here, F?" she asked, needing words to fill the dangerous silence that had settled between them. "Because," he said, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper, "sometimes even the damned need sanctuary." The thread pulled through flesh with a wet sound that seemed too loud in the quiet room. Outside, the wind had stilled completely, as if the world itself was holding its breath, waiting to see what would happen next in this impossible meeting between sacred and profane. Seraphina's hands moved with mechanical precision, each stitch pulling damaged flesh together, while her mind reeled with the impossibility of the situation. The needle trembled only once when Lysander's fingers suddenly wrapped around her wrist, not forcefully, but with surprising gentleness. "Your hands?" he said, studying them in the lamplight. "They've held scalpels before. This isn't amateur work." She pulled away, disturbed by how his touch seemed to leave invisible marks on her skin. "I was a surgical nurse. Before God?" His question carried no mockery, only genuine curiosity. Before everything changed. She tied off the final suture, then moved to the medicine cabinet, needing distance from his penetrating gaze. "You'll need antibiotics. We don't have much, but—" "Seraphina." She froze. "I didn't tell you my name. The Mother Superior called for you during evening prayers. Your sisters were concerned when you didn't appear." He shifted on the bed, suppressing a wince. "I've been here since before sunset, waiting in the shadows like the coward I am, trying to decide if I should knock or bleed out in your garden. You were watching us?" The violation of it should have angered her, but instead, she felt something else, a flutter of something dangerous and unfamiliar. "I was dying," he corrected. "There's a difference. And then I saw you through the chapel windows, kneeling in the back row, and I thought—" He trailed off, shaking his head. Foolish thoughts of a man losing blood. She returned with bandages and a vial of penicillin, her movements sharp with forced efficiency. "This will hurt." "Good," he said, and she paused at the self-loathing in his voice. "Pain means I'm still alive. Still capable of feeling something other than—" He caught himself, jaw clenching. The needle pierced his skin, and she watched his knuckles go white as he gripped the bed frame. No sound escaped him, though she could see the effort it cost. This was a man accustomed to swallowing his screams. "Who did this to you?" She shouldn't have asked, shouldn't have cared, but the question emerged anyway. "Men who used to call me brother." His laugh was bitter as winter frost. "In my world, loyalty is a currency that devalues quickly. One day you're family, the next you're a problem to be solved with bullets." She began wrapping the bandage around his torso, trying to ignore the heat radiating from his skin, the way his breathing changed when her fingers brushed against him. "And what is your world exactly?" "One you should run from, little saint." His hand caught hers again, this time holding it against the bandage, against his heartbeat. "I'm not a good man, Seraphina. I've done things that would make your God weep, ordered things done that would turn your prayers to ash in your mouth." She should have pulled away, should have demanded he leave immediately. Instead, she found herself studying the scars on his knuckles, the calluses that spoke of violence as fluent as any language. "Then why did you come here? Really?" "Because," he said, releasing her hand with obvious reluctance, "I wanted to die somewhere clean, somewhere that didn't smell of blood and betrayal. And then I saw you, and I wanted—" He stopped, shaking his head. "It doesn't matter what I wanted." She busied herself cleaning the medical supplies, her back to him, trying to calm her racing pulse. "You can't stay here. When the sisters wake, I'll be gone before lauds." He attempted to sit up, face paling with the effort. "Just need an hour. Maybe 2. You need at least 12 hours before those stitches can hold any real movement." Her professional assessment warred with her personal desire to see him leave. "There's an old storage room in the cellar. Sister Margarita hasn't been down there in years because of her hip." "You could—" She stopped, horrified at what she was suggesting. Harboring a fugitive? His smile was sharp as broken glass. "Careful, sister. That halo is starting to slip." Heat flooded her cheeks. I'm offering Christian mercy to a wounded man. Nothing more. Is that what you tell yourself? He stood slowly, one hand braced against the wall. Even wounded, he towered over her, and she became acutely aware of their proximity, of the inappropriate intimacy of the empty infirmary at 3 a.m. What do you tell yourself about the way your pulse jumps when I look at you? You're delirious from blood loss, she said, but her voice came out breathless. Perhaps. He leaned closer, and she caught that scent again, gunpowder and expensive cologne mixed with something uniquely him. Or perhaps I recognize something in you, Serafina. Something wild that you've caged behind prayers and good works. You don't know me. No, he agreed, stepping back with visible effort. But I know what it looks like when someone's running from themselves. I've been doing it for 37 years. She led him to the cellar in silence, their footsteps echoing on the ancient stone steps. The storage room was cramped but dry, filled with forgotten furniture and dusty wine racks from when the convent made their own communion wine. She brought blankets, water, and bread, simple offerings that felt like betrayal. The bells for morning prayer ring at 5, she said, not meeting his eyes. You need to be gone before then, Serafina. Her name on his lips was a prayer and a curse combined. Thank you. She fled before she could respond, before the weight of his gratitude could settle on her shoulders like a hair shirt. But even as she knelt in her cell, trying to pray, all she could think about was the amber of his eyes and the terrifying realization that she wanted to know what other scars he carried, both visible and hidden. Behind her, in the darkness of the cellar, Lysander's lieutenant Dmitri emerged from the shadows where he'd been waiting. Boss, we should go. The Toretti family. Not yet, Lysander interrupted, his gaze fixed on the stairs where Serafina had disappeared. Not yet. The cellar was empty when Serafina descended at dawn. Only a precisely folded blanket and a single black rose. God knew where he'd found it, marking Lysander's presence. She picked up the flower, its thorns pricking her thumb, drawing a bead of blood that seemed too bright in the dim morning light. For 3 days, she moved through her routines like a sleepwalker. Lauds, breakfast, tending the garden, teaching catechism to the village children, vespers, compline, each prayer felt hollow. Words she'd recited thousands of times suddenly foreign on her tongue. Sister Margarita noticed first, her clouded eyes still sharp enough to catch Serafina staring at nothing during meditation. You're troubled, child, the elderly nun said, catching her after evening prayers. I'm fine, sister. Lies sit poorly on lips that have taken vows. Margarita's weathered hand touched her cheek. Whatever burden you carry, God isn't the problem, Serafina said, then immediately regretted the admission. She began taking longer shifts in the infirmary, hoping work would exhaust her enough to stop the dreams. But they came anyway, amber eyes watching her from shadows, scarred hands reaching for her, his voice calling her little saint with such tender mockery that she woke gasping, her skin feverish, her body aching with unnamed want. The worst part was the emptiness. She'd lived contentedly within these walls for 6 years, finding peace in routine and purpose in service. Now everything felt like a costume she was wearing, a role she was playing while her true self screamed to break free. During confession, she knelt before Father Antonio's screen and found herself unable to speak. How could she confess that she missed a man she'd known for mere hours? How could she explain that his absence felt like a wound that wouldn't heal? Forgive me, Father, for I have sinned, she finally managed. Tell me your sins, child. I helped someone I shouldn't have. Someone dangerous. Compassion is never a sin, Sister Serafina. Christ himself ate with tax collectors and sinners. But what if? She pressed her forehead against the wooden screen. What if helping them changed something in me? What if I can't change it back? Father Antonio was quiet for a long moment. Perhaps the question isn't whether you can change back, but whether you should. That night, she stood at the same window where she'd first felt the premonition of Lysander's arrival. The frost had melted, leaving the olive groves silver in the moonlight. She pressed her palm against the glass, remembering how his skin had burned with fever, how carefully he'd controlled his breathing despite the pain. Where are you? She whispered to the darkness. 20 miles away, in a safe house that smelled of leather and cigar smoke, Lysander Volkov sat shirtless before a mirror, watching Dmitri change his bandages. The stitches were healing well, too well. He'd have them removed tomorrow, erasing the last physical evidence of his night at the convent. "You're distracted," Dmitri observed, applying fresh gauze with practiced efficiency. "This is unlike you. Everything is unlike me lately." Lysander reached for the vodka bottle on the dresser, then stopped, his hand hovering. Alcohol would blur her memory, and that was the last thing he wanted. The Corsini family is willing to negotiate. They want to discuss territory divisions, especially the ports. Victor says, "I don't care what Victor says." The words came out sharper than intended. "Handle it." Dmitri raised an eyebrow. "You don't care about the ports?" "These are millions we're talking about, Lysander. The entire Eastern European route." I said, "Handle it." His lieutenant finished the bandaging in silence, then stood to leave. At the door, he paused. "Whoever she is, she's going to get you killed." After Dmitri left, Lysander pulled out the worn medical gauge he'd kept, the one with her blood on it from when she'd pricked herself preparing the suture. Such a small thing, yet he carried it like a talisman. He'd built an empire on reading people, on understanding their weaknesses and desires. But Serafina, she was an enigma wrapped in a habit. No, that wasn't true. The enigma was how she made him feel like he was 20 again, before the first kill, before the blood and concrete, when he still believed in things like redemption. She'd touched him with those careful, competent hands, and for the first time in decades, he'd wanted to be worthy of gentleness. "Stupid," he muttered, reaching for his phone. He had her information, had gotten it within hours of leaving the convent. Sister Serafina Calabresi, 31 years old, former surgical nurse at Ospedale San Raffaele in Milan. Parents died in a car accident, no siblings. Entered the convent 6 years ago. The facts told him nothing about why her pulse had jumped under his fingers, or why she'd offered him shelter despite the danger, or why she'd looked at him like she was drowning, and he was both the water and the shore. His phone rang, Victor, probably with news about the Corsini meeting. He let it go to voicemail. Then it rang again, and again. "What?" he finally answered. "We have a problem." Victor's voice was tight. "Someone's been asking questions about your whereabouts 3 nights ago. Someone from the church." Lysander sat up straighter. "What kind of questions?" "The kind that suggests they know you were wounded. The kind that could lead back to wherever you were hiding." Ice flooded his veins. "If anyone traced him to the convent, to her. Double the security on all church properties in Sicily." Quietly. "I don't want any attention drawn to one in particular." Victor's tone was knowing. "Boss, if there's something I should know, just do it." He hung up, already reaching for his jacket. He'd sworn to stay away, to let her return to her peaceful life. But if she was in danger because of him, the black rose he'd left her had been a goodbye. Now, it might become an apology for the storm he was about to bring to her door. The festival of San Giuseppe transformed the village below the convent into a constellation of lights and music. Serafina stood at the booth the sisters operated each year, selling honey from their hives and embroidered prayer cloths that Sister Margarita's arthritis couldn't quite prevent her from making. The square pulsed with life, children chasing each other between vendor stalls, elderly couples dancing to the band's traditional melodies, the air thick with the scent of arancini and cannoli. She was counting change for a customer when she felt it, that electric awareness that made her skin prickle and her breath catch. She looked up, scanning the crowd, and there he was. Lysander stood beside the fountain in the center of the square, dressed in a charcoal suit that probably cost more than the convent's annual budget. He wasn't looking at her, he was studying a vendor's display of ceramic saints with apparent fascination, but she knew he was aware of her. The careful angle of his body, the way he kept her in his peripheral vision, told her everything. "Sister Serafina?" The customer's voice startled her. "My change?" "Oh, forgive me." She handed over the coins with trembling fingers, then turned to Sister Margarita. "I need to check our supplies in the van." The elderly nun's knowing look followed her as she walked away, each step measured and deliberate, fighting the urge to run, though whether toward him or away, she couldn't say. She didn't go to the van. Instead, she found herself at the fountain's edge, close enough to catch his scent on the wind. He turned slowly, those amber eyes finding hers with an intensity that made her knees weak. "You shouldn't be here," she said quietly. "Neither should you." His gaze traveled over her simple habit, lingering on her face. "You look tired." "I haven't been sleeping well." "Neither have I." He stepped closer, maintaining a respectful distance but somehow filling all the space between them with unspoken words. "I came to warn you. There are people asking questions. About you? About where I was that night. If they trace it back to the convent, they won't." She surprised herself with the conviction in her voice. "I was careful. No one saw." His lips curved in that dangerous half-smile. "You were careful? Tell me, sister, how many fugitives have you hidden?" "Just the one." The admission hung between them like a confession. "Though I'm beginning to think I'm the one who's been in hiding." Something flickered in his eyes, surprise, perhaps, or recognition. "Serafina, there you are." Father Antonio's jovial voice shattered the moment. The elderly priest approached with his usual good cheer, though his eyes sharpened as they took in Lysander. "Sister, Mother Superior is looking for you. And who might this be?" "Alexei Morozov." Lysander lied smoothly, extending his hand. "I'm interested in making a donation to the convent. Sister Serafina was just telling me about your good works." Father Antonio's handshake was firm, his smile not quite reaching his eyes. "How generous. Perhaps you'd like to discuss it with Mother Superior directly?" "Unfortunately, I have another engagement." Lysander pulled out a leather wallet, extracting what looked like several thousand euros. "But please, accept this as an initial contribution." The priest's eyebrows rose. "This is most generous, Mr. Morozov. The sisters do important work." His eyes found Serafina's again. "Sometimes salvation comes from unexpected places." He walked away without another word, disappearing into the crowd as suddenly as he'd appeared. But as Serafina helped Father Antonio carry the donation back to their booth, she felt something in her pocket that hadn't been there before. A small piece of paper, folded precisely. She waited until she was alone in the van to read it. "Tomorrow, midnight, the olive grove behind the convent. Come alone, else she should have torn it up, should have confessed everything to Mother Superior. Should have done anything except press the note to her chest and feel her heart race with anticipation." The next night, she slipped out through the same door he'd entered 2 weeks ago. The olive grove was silver in the moonlight, shadows dancing between ancient trees. She found him leaning against a gnarled trunk, smoking a cigarette that he immediately extinguished when he saw her. "You came," he said, and she heard relief in his voice. "Did you doubt?" "Every second." She walked to him slowly, savoring the moment. "What happens now?" "That depends on you." He pushed off from the tree, moving closer. "I could disappear, leave you to your prayers and your peace. Or we could stop pretending that either of us can forget what happened." He reached out, fingers barely grazing her cheek. "I've tried, Serafina. God knows I've tried. But you're in my blood now. This is impossible," she whispered, but she didn't pull away from his touch. Most real things are. His thumb traced her cheekbone. "There's something else. Something you should see before you decide anything." "What?" "My world. The truth of it. No illusions, no pretense." He dropped his hand, stepping back. "There's an event, a gathering of families, business disguised as a social occasion. Come with me." "How would you explain me?" "I wouldn't. You'd be exactly who you are, a nun. I'm courting for a charitable donation." His smile was sharp with irony, hidden in plain sight. "When?" "Sunday night." She should have said no. Instead, she heard herself asking, "What does one wear to a mafia gathering?" His surprise transformed into something tender. "I'll send something appropriate." "And Lysander?" She touched his face, tracing the scar by his eyebrow. "After Sunday, we decide. Together. Whether this is possible or just a beautiful dream." "It's possible," he said with such conviction that she almost believed him. "We'll make it possible." As she turned to leave, he called her name. She looked back to find him watching her with an expression she couldn't read. "Once you see that world, you can't unsee it," he warned. "Good," she said, and meant it. "I want to see all of you, even the parts that should terrify me. They will terrify you. Then at least I'll know the truth." She paused at the edge of the grove. That's more than I can say about my own life right now. Walking back to the convent, she felt the weight of the choice ahead. But for the first time in weeks, the weight felt like anticipation rather than dread. Whatever came next, at least it would be real. The dress arrived at the convent in a box marked medical supplies, which Sister Margarita handed to Serafina with a look that said she wasn't fooled for a moment. Alone in her cell, Serafina opened it to find a black cocktail dress of exquisite simplicity, modest enough to be respectful, elegant enough to blend in wherever Lysander was taking her. Beneath it lay a pair of heels and a note. A car will be waiting at the village church at 8 p.m. Burn this note. Elsie told Mother Superior she needed to visit a sick aunt in Palermo, her first outright lie in 6 years. The guilt of it sat like a stone in her stomach as she changed in the church bathroom, transforming from Sister Serafina into someone she didn't recognize. The dress fit perfectly, of course. Lysander had guessed her measurements with unnerving accuracy. The car was a black Mercedes with tinted windows. The driver said nothing, just opened the door for her. She found Lysander in the back seat, and for a moment, they just stared at each other. He was in a black tuxedo, his hair slicked back, looking every inch the dangerous man he was. "You came," he said, echoing their meeting in the olive grove. "Did you doubt I would?" "I hoped you wouldn't." He reached over, his fingers hovering near her face without touching. "You've never worn your hair down." She'd forgotten about that, how her dark hair, usually hidden beneath her veil, now tumbled past her shoulders. "There are a lot of things I haven't done." The drive took them to a villa overlooking the coast, lit up like a constellation against the night sky. Valet attendants took the car, and Lysander offered her his arm. The contact, even through layers of fabric, sent electricity through her. "Remember," he murmured as they approached the entrance, "you're a nun interested in charitable work. Stay close to me. Don't accept drinks from anyone else. And whatever you see or hear, show no reaction." The villa's interior was opulent marble floors, crystal chandeliers, priceless art on every wall. Men in tuxedos and women dripping in jewels moved through the space like predators pretending to be socialites. Serafina recognized the undercurrent immediately, the same tension that filled emergency rooms before a trauma came in. "Lysander!" A man with silver hair and cold eyes approached, speaking Italian with a Roman accent. "We heard you were injured. Yet here you are, looking perfectly healthy." "Rumors of my death were exaggerated, Enzo." Lysander's tone was light, but his arm tensed under her hand. "May I introduce Sister Serafina? She runs a medical charity I'm considering supporting." Enzo's gaze slithered over her. "A nun? How? Unusual." "Sister Serafina has been showing me the value of charity," Lysander said smoothly. "One must think of the soul, after all." Enzo laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "Since when do you have a soul to save?" "Since I met her," Lysander replied, and the truth of it hung in the air dangerously. They moved through the party, Lysander introducing her to people whose names she recognized from newspaper headlines, always in connection with investigations that went nowhere, charges that never stuck. She kept her expression serene, played her role perfectly, but inside she was cataloging everything. The way conversations stopped when Lysander approached, the deference mixed with fear, the careful dance of power and violence. In a quiet corner, she watched him conduct business, with subtle gestures and coded words. A nod here meant someone would live. A slight shake of his head, there might be a death sentence. This was his world, brutal, elegant, and absolutely without mercy. "Are you frightened?" he asked during a moment alone on the terrace. "Yes." She looked out at the sea, moonlight painting the waves silver. "But not of what you think." "What then?" "I'm frightened of how natural this feels, standing beside you, seeing you in your element." She turned to face him. "I should be horrified. Instead, I'm—" "What?" "Fascinated." The admission cost her. "What kind of nun does that make me?" "An honest one." He moved closer, backing her against the balcony railing. "Do you want to know what kind of man I really am?" "Yes. 3 days ago, I ordered the death of a man who betrayed me. He had a family, a wife, 2 children. I knew this, and I gave the order anyway." His eyes searched hers. "He was stealing from me, selling information to rivals. In my world, that's a death sentence. She should have recoiled. Instead, she asked, "Do you regret it?" "I regret the necessity. But no, I don't regret the action." His hand came up to cup her face. "Does that disgust you?" "It should." She leaned into his touch. "But I've held dying children in my arms, Lysander. I've watched good people suffer while evil ones prosper. The world isn't black and white." Maybe it never was. Inside, someone started playing piano, a melancholy piece that drifted through the open doors. Lysander held out his hand. "Dance with me. I don't know how. I'll teach you." He led her to a shadowed corner of the terrace, pulling her into his arms with careful precision, one hand on her waist, the other holding hers. He guided her through simple steps. She was clumsy at first, stepping on his feet, but he was patient, murmuring instructions against her ear. "You're trembling," he observed. "No one's ever held me like this." "Like what?" "Like I'm precious. Like I might break." She looked up at him. "Like I matter. You do matter. More than you should. More than is safe." The music shifted to something slower, and he pulled her closer. She could feel his heartbeat against her chest, steady and strong. Around them, the party continued, deals being made, alliances formed, threats implied, but in their shadowed corner, they existed in a bubble outside of time. "What are we doing?" she whispered. "I don't know." His lips brushed her temple. "But I can't stop. Neither can I." When the music ended, they stayed frozen for a moment, neither willing to break the spell. Then someone called Lysander's name, and reality crashed back. In the car afterward, they sat in silence until she asked, "Was that typical?" "No. Usually, there's more blood." She couldn't tell if he was joking. He had the driver take a longer route back, winding through coastal roads. "You can still walk away," he said finally. "Go back to your convent, your prayers, your simple life. Forget you ever met me. Can you forget?" "No." "Then we have our answer." As they approached the village, he took her hand. "Serafina, there's something else. The men asking questions, they're getting closer." Dmitri thinks. "I know," she interrupted. "I can feel it. Something's coming. I won't let them hurt you." She squeezed his hand. "I know that too." The photographs were spread across Mother Superior's desk, like accusations when Serafina was summoned 3 days later. Her heart stopped at the sight of them herself in the black dress, Lysander's hand on her waist as they danced, her face tilted up toward his with an expression she didn't recognize as her own. "Explain," Mother Superior Beatrice said, her voice arctic. Serafina's mouth went dry. How did you?" "They were delivered this morning." No note, no return address. The older woman's eyes were filled with disappointment that cut deeper than anger. "That man? Do you know who he is?" "And, yes. Do you know what he is?" "Yes. And yet you went to him. You lied to me, to your sisters, to God." Serafina sank into the chair across from the desk, her legs unable to hold her. "I didn't mean for it to happen. These things never mean to happen, child. That's how the devil works in increments, in moments of weakness disguised as connection." Mother Superior picked up one photograph, the one where Lysander was whispering in her ear. Her eyes closed in what looked like rapture. "Is this who you are now?" "I don't know who I am anymore," Serafina admitted, tears burning her eyes. "When I'm with him, I feel alive. Like I've been sleepwalking for 6 years and finally woke up. That's not awakening, that's temptation." "How do you know?" The words burst out before she could stop them. "How does anyone know the difference between divine calling and human desire? I came here because I was running from grief, not running to God. Maybe I've been the fraud all along." Mother Superior was quiet for a long moment. Then she stood, moving to the window that overlooked the gardens. "There's more. The man who delivered these photos, he wasn't just a messenger. He was a warning." "What do you mean?" "He made it clear that our convent exists at the pleasure of certain organizations, that our safety, our ability to continue our work, depends on cooperation." She turned back, her face etched with worry. "Your association with this man has put us all at risk." The blood drained from Serafina's face. "Lysander would never, not him, his enemies. You've become a pressure point, child, a weakness to be exploited." Before Serafina could respond, the bell at the gate rang urgently, then again, and again. Sister Margarita's voice called out in alarm. They rushed outside to find 3 black SUVs blocking the convent entrance. Men in dark suits stood beside them, their presence radiating menace. And being dragged between 2 of them, blood streaming from his nose, was Lysander. "No!" Serafina started forward, but Mother Superior caught her arm. A man emerged from the middle vehicle older, with silver hair and eyes like a snake. Serafina recognized him from the party. "Enzo Toretti, Sister Serafina," he called out pleasantly, as if they were meeting for tea. "How lovely to see you again, though I must say, you look better in black than in this." He gestured dismissively at her habit. "Let him go," she said, surprised by the steadiness of her own voice. "Oh, I will. Eventually. But first, we need to have a conversation about choices and consequences." He nodded to his men, who forced Lysander to his knees. "You see, your lover here has been causing problems. Refusing meetings, delegating responsibilities, distracted by earthly concerns. I'm not, please." Enzo held up a hand. "We have photographs. We have witnesses. We know he's been protecting this place, allocating resources to ensure your safety, resources that should be going to family business." Lysander raised his head, blood dripping from a cut above his eye. "Enzo, this has nothing to do with her." "But it does." Enzo pulled out a gun, pressing it to Lysander's temple. "Everything to do with her." The nuns had gathered in the doorway, some praying, others frozen in shock. Serafina felt the weight of their eyes, their judgment, their fear. Dmitri was nowhere to be seen, probably watching from a distance, waiting for a signal. "What do you want?" she asked. "I want our Lysander back. The one who didn't hesitate, didn't question, didn't get distracted by pretty faces and false redemption." He cocked the gun. "So here's what's going to happen. You're going to walk over here, tell him exactly what he was to you, a moment of weakness, a mistake, nothing more. You're going to make him believe it, and then you're going to go back inside and never come out again. And if I don't, then I paint these holy walls with his blood, and then, perhaps, we discuss what happens to convents that harbor criminals." Serafina looked at Lysander. Even bloodied and kneeling, he radiated defiance. His eyes met hers, and she saw him mouth a single word: "Run." Instead, she walked forward, each step measured and deliberate. She stopped in front of him, close enough to see the muscle ticking in his jaw, the way his hands clenched despite the men holding him. "Look at me," she said softly. He did, and she saw everything in his eyes: love, fear, resignation, and a terrible understanding of what was about to happen. "You were," she swallowed hard, forcing the words past the knot in her throat. "You were a mistake, a moment of weakness. I was curious about the darkness, but I see now that's all it was. Curiosity." His face didn't change, but something in his eyes died. "I'm a bride of Christ," she continued, hating herself with every word. "I forgot that, briefly, but I remember now. You mean nothing to me beyond a soul that needs prayer. Go back to your world, Lysander. There's nothing for you here." The silence stretched between them like a wound. Then Lysander smiled, a terrible, empty thing. "I believe you," he said, and somehow that was worse than anger would have been. Enzo laughed, holstering his gun. "Beautiful performance, almost believable." He gestured to his men. "Let him up." They released Lysander, who stood slowly, never taking his eyes off Serafina. "Goodbye, sister," he said formally, as if they were strangers. He walked to one of the SUVs without looking back. Enzo lingered, studying Serafina with reptilian interest. "You're a good liar," he said quietly, so only she could hear. "Almost as good as you are at telling the truth. I wonder which one that was." He left without waiting for an answer. The vehicles drove away, leaving tire marks in the gravel, and Serafina standing alone, feeling like she'd just carved out her own heart. 2 weeks passed in agonizing routine. Serafina moved through her days like a ghost, her body present but her spirit elsewhere. The other sisters treated her with a mixture of pity and wariness, as if her corruption might be contagious. She took on the harshest penances, scrubbing floors until her hands cracked, fasting until Mother Superior intervened, praying until the words became meaningless sound. but nothing could erase the memory of Lysander's eyes when she'd betrayed him that moment when the light went out. Then came the night when everything shattered. Completely. She woke to the sound of vehicles too many, moving too fast. Her window faced the front gate, and she watched in growing horror as SUVs surrounded the convent. Not Enzo's men this time. She recognized the precision of their movement, the efficiency that marked Lysander's organization. They breached the gate in seconds. No violence, just overwhelming force. The nuns were gathered in the main hall, confused and frightened in their nightclothes. Serafina rushed down to find Dimitri directing the operation. "What are you doing?" she demanded. "Following orders." His expression was stone. "You need to come with us. I'm not going anywhere. This isn't a request." He nodded to two men who took position on either side of her. "He said you'd resist. He also said to tell you that Enzo Toretti is dead, and his men are coming here for revenge." The blood drained from her face. "When?" "2 hours ago. Lysander killed him personally." Slowly. Dimitri's smile was sharp. "Apparently, Enzo made the mistake of threatening something that belonged to the boss. I don't belong to." An explosion rocked the building. The east wing, the old dormitory, erupted in flames. Through the smoke and chaos, she heard gunfire. "They're here," Dimitri said calmly. "You can come with us, or you can die with your sisters. Choose quickly." But Serafina was already running toward the infirmary, where the elderly nuns slept. The smoke was thick, choking, but she knew these halls blind. She found Sister Margarita trying to help Sister Catherine, both women coughing violently. "This way." She guided them toward the garden exit, only to find it blocked by armed men, not Lysander's. She could tell by their sloppy positioning. One raised his gun toward them, and Serafina stepped forward, shielding the elderly nuns. The shot never came. The man dropped, a knife protruding from his throat. Lysander emerged from the shadows like an avenging angel cast from heaven, but there was nothing holy about him now. His white shirt was splattered with blood, his movements liquid violence as he eliminated the remaining threats with brutal efficiency. He didn't look at her, just spoke to his men in rapid Russian. They evacuated the nuns with military precision, while Lysander stalked through the convent like he owned it, checking every room, every corner. Serafina followed him to the chapel, where he stood before the crucifix, blood dripping from his hands onto the sacred floor. "You're destroying everything," she said. He turned slowly, and she gasped at his expression, not angry, but empty, like something vital had been extinguished. "I already destroyed everything," he said quietly. "The moment I walked through your door that night." "Why did you kill Enzo?" "8. Because he touched you, threatened you, made you say those words." He moved closer, and she could smell blood and gunpowder, and that cologne she'd never forget. "Did you mean them?" "Does it matter?" "It's the only thing that matters." More gunfire outside, Dimitri's voice through a radio. Lysander ignored it all, his focus entirely on her. "I meant them," she lied. "No." He backed her against the altar. "Say it again. Look me in the eyes and tell me I meant nothing." She met his gaze, opened her mouth, but the words wouldn't come, because behind the emptiness in his eyes, she saw the truth he was dying inside, had been dying since that day at the gate, and she was the only one who could save him, or destroy him completely. "I can't," she whispered. His hand came up to cup her face, thumb tracing her cheekbone with terrible gentleness. "They'll never stop coming for you now. Enzo's brothers, his allies. You're marked because of me. Then why save me?" "Because I'd rather see the world burn than watch you hurt." His thumb brushed across her lower lip. "Because I'm selfish enough to keep you alive even if you hate me for it." An explosion! Closer this time. The stained glass windows shattered, raining colored fragments like deadly snow. Lysander shielded her with his body, and she felt him flinch as glass embedded in his back. "We need to go." Dimitri appeared in the doorway. "Now." Lysander straightened, decision made. He simply picked Serafina up, ignoring her protests, and carried her from the burning convent. She beat against his chest, demanding he put her down, but his grip was iron. In the SUV, she saw the full scope of the destruction. The convent was in flames, gunfire echoing through the night. Bodies littered the ground, all enemies. She noted with sick relief. The sisters. Safe, Dimitri assured her. Relocated to the monastery in Tuscany. They'll be protected. She looked at Lysander, who stared straight ahead, blood seeping through his shirt from the glass wounds. You planned this. I planned for every contingency the moment you became my weakness. His voice was emotionless. Enzo just accelerated the timeline. Where are you taking me? Somewhere safe. A prison, you mean? He finally looked at her, and the emptiness was gone, replaced by something raw and desperate. The only prison here is the one we've built for each other, and God help us both. Neither of us wants to escape. The SUV drove through the night, leaving the burning convent behind. Serafina watched in the side mirror as her old life turned to ash and smoke, and wondered if redemption was even possible now for either of them. She thought of the other sisters, safe but displaced, of the elderly nuns who'd lived their entire lives in those walls, now forced to start over, all because of her, all because she'd saved a wounded man one stormy night. I hate you, she whispered, but the words held no conviction. No, Lysander said quietly. You hate yourself for wanting this, for wanting me. Despite everything, she turned away because he was right. And that truth burned worse than the convent flames reflected in the window. The safe house was a fortress disguised as a villa, perched on cliffs overlooking the Adriatic Sea. Serafina had been there 3 days, watching the horizon from windows that wouldn't break even under gunfire. Lysander had demonstrated this with disturbing casualness. During those days, she'd watched Dimitri enter the panic room code, twice, always the same sequence, burning it into her memory without conscious thought. He kept his distance, appearing only to ensure she ate, to have medical supplies delivered for his glass wounds that he wouldn't let her treat. The silence between them was suffocating, filled with everything they couldn't say. On the third night, she found him in his study, examining surveillance footage on multiple screens. His back was to her, shirt discarded, revealing the constellation of fresh wounds among old scars. Without asking permission, she took the medical kit from his desk and began removing glass shards with tweezers. He tensed, but didn't stop her. You shouldn't be here. Where else would I be? You've made sure of that. She extracted a particularly deep piece, and he didn't even flinch. How many men have you killed? 47. No hesitation. I remember each one. Does it get easier? No. You just get better at living with the weight. He turned his head slightly. Why do you ask? Because I want to understand how you carry it. The blood, the violence. She cleaned the last wound carefully. How you can be gentle with me when your hands have done such terrible things. Maybe gentleness is my penance. He turned to face her fully. Or maybe you're the only thing worth being gentle for. Before she could respond, alarms erupted throughout the villa. The screens flickered to show multiple vehicles approaching, not just a few, but an army. Dimitri burst in. It's the Toretti brothers! All of them! They've brought everyone. Lysander was already moving, pulling on a tactical vest, checking weapons with practiced efficiency. How many? 60, maybe 70 men. Get her to the panic room. No. Serafina's voice was firm. I won't hide while you die for me. You will do exactly that. He gripped her shoulders. Because if you die, then all of this, every life I've taken, every line I've crossed means nothing. And if you die? He kissed her then, hard and desperate, pouring everything he couldn't say into the contact. When he pulled back, his eyes were fierce. Then you run. You take the boat in the lower cave and you run. Promise me, Lysander. Promise me. I promise, she lied. The panic room was a steel tomb hidden behind the study's bookshelf. Dimitri locked her in with apologies in his eyes, and she was left with only the security monitors to watch the nightmare unfold. They came in waves. The first assault was repelled at the gates, bodies falling under precise sniper fire. But there were too many. They breached the outer walls, then the gardens, moving inexorably toward the villa. She watched Lysander command his men with lethal efficiency, positioning them, directing fire, always in motion. He was magnificent and terrible, death incarnate in designer clothes. Then she saw him, Salvatore Toretti, Enzo's eldest brother, flanked by a personal guard, moving toward the villa's east entrance, the weakest point, currently undefended, as Lysander's men were drawn to the main assault. Without thinking, She input the override code she'd memorized from watching Dimitri. The panic room door hissed open. The villa was chaos, smoke, gunfire, men shouting in multiple languages. She stayed low, moving through servants' passages she discovered during her exploration. In Lysander's bedroom, she found what she was looking for, a loaded pistol he kept in the nightstand. She'd never held a gun before. It was heavier than expected, cold and foreign in her hands. But she thought of the burning convent, of Sister Margarita's frightened eyes, of Lysander bleeding to protect her, and her grip steadied. She intercepted Salvatore's group in the east corridor. They didn't expect her, a nun with a gun, was apparently outside their experience. She shot the first guard in the shoulder, the recoil shocking her. The second grabbed her, and she fought with desperate fury, remembering the self-defense moves her father had taught her decades ago. Salvatore backhanded her, sending her sprawling, the gun skittering across marble. "The little nun has teeth," he laughed, pulling his own weapon. "Enzo was right about you." Too much fire for a convent. The shot was impossibly loud, but it wasn't Salvatore's gun. Lysander stood in the doorway, smoking pistol aimed at where Salvatore's head had been. The man crumpled, blood pooling on white marble. "I told you to stay in the panic room." His voice was deadly quiet. "I saw them coming." "You couldn't." He crossed to her in 2 strides, pulling her against him with crushing force. She could feel him trembling, not from exertion, but from fear. "You could have died. So could you. I'm used to it. You're not supposed to." He stopped, pulling back to examine her split lip. "He hurt you." "I'm fine." "No." Something shifted in his expression, decision crystallizing. "No more." What followed was not a battle, but an execution. Lysander became something inhuman, moving through the villa like a plague, ending every threat with surgical precision. She followed despite his orders to stay back, watching him dismantle the assault with a fury that transcended violence and became almost art. When the last Toretti soldier fell, the villa was a charnel house. Lysander stood in the main hall, blood-splattered and breathing hard, surrounded by the dead. Dimitri appeared from wherever he'd been fighting, equally bloodied but alive. "Is it over?" she asked. "This part is." Lysander turned to her, and she saw the cost in his eyes, not guilt, but exhaustion. "There will always be others. As long as you're with me. There will be others who try to use you against me. Then we face them together." "Serafina." "No." She moved to him, stepping over bodies without flinching. "I've seen the worst of you now. I've seen what you're capable of, and I'm still here." "Why?" "Because somewhere between the blood and the bullets, I realized something." She touched his face, smearing blood across his cheek. "I'm not trying to save you anymore, and you're not trying to corrupt me. We're just 2 damaged people finding grace in the last place anyone would look for it." He kissed her then, soft despite the violence surrounding them, tender despite the blood on their hands. And in that moment, in that villa of death, something new was born, not redemption, but acceptance. The monastery in the Swiss Alps was nothing like the warm Sicilian convent Serafina had known. Here, the walls were thick stone that held cold like a memory, and the windows looked out on perpetual snow. Lysander had brought her here after the villa assault, to a place so remote that even God might have trouble finding them. She hadn't expected him to stay, but he'd taken a room in the guest wing, submitting to the abbot's strict rules with uncharacteristic humility. No weapons, no business, no visitors except Dimitri, who brought supplies and reports that Lysander burned after reading. They were both healing, she from the bruises Salvatore had left, he from wounds both physical and deeper. She found him one morning in the chapel, kneeling in the back row, not praying but staring at the crucifix with an expression of profound confusion. "Asking for forgiveness?" she asked, sliding into the pew beside him, trying to understand why he would create someone like me. His voice was raw. "What purpose does a monster serve in his plan?" "You're not a monster. I've killed 47 people now, 47 souls sent to judgment by my hand, to protect others. To protect me, that doesn't absolve me." He turned to her, and she saw tears he would never let fall. "But the worst part? I would do it again. All of it. To keep you safe, I would burn the world." She took his hand, feeling the calluses from weapons, the scars from battles. "Then maybe that's your purpose. To be the sword when others need protection. And what's yours? To be my conscience? No. She squeezed his hand. To be your peace. They began spending their days together in the monastery library, reading in companionable silence. She discovered his love for poetry, Dante of course, but also Rumi, Neruda, verses about love and damnation that he would sometimes read aloud in his accented English. One evening, she found him writing in a leather journal, his elegant script filling pages. What are you writing? Letters. To the families of the men I've killed. He didn't look up. I'll never send them, but perhaps writing them is a kind of penance. She read over his shoulder, seeing not excuses, but acknowledgments. Your son died because I chose my empire over his life. Your husband's last words were about his children. Your brother fought, bravely. This must be agony. She said softly. It should be. Their death should cost me something more than bullets. That night, she went to his room, a breach of monastery protocol that would have horrified her weeks ago. She found him at the window, watching snow fall in the moonlight. Can't sleep? She asked. I dream of you, he admitted without turning. Not improperly, just dreams where you're gone, where I couldn't save you. Where you look at me with dead eyes and ask why I failed. She moved behind him, wrapping her arms around his waist, feeling him tense, then slowly relax. I'm here. I'm alive. You saved me. At what cost? The only cost that mattered, the one you were willing to pay. He turned in her arms, looking down at her with wonder. How do you still see good in me? Because I see the man who's gentle with me even when the world taught him violence, who protects even when it damns him, who kneels in chapels he doesn't believe deserve him. She reached up to touch his face. I see you, Lysander. All of you. And I choose all of you. Even the blood? Especially the blood. Because you shed it for love, not pleasure. That matters. He kissed her forehead, breathing her in. The abbot says I can stay another week. After that, we decide together. They spent that week in a strange Eden, walking through snow-covered gardens, sharing meals in comfortable silence, existing in a bubble outside time and consequence. She taught him to bake bread, laughing at his frustrated attempts to knead dough with hands trained for violence. He taught her chess, unsurprised when she proved a natural strategist. Brother Thomas, the elderly monk who ran the library, watched them with knowing eyes. You're healing each other, he told Serafina one afternoon. Not fixing healing. There's a difference. What difference? Fixing implies returning to what was. Healing means becoming something new. He smiled. That young man of yours, he's never known gentleness before you. And you, sister, have never known wildness before him. Perhaps God brought you together not despite these things, but because of them. On their last night at the monastery, they sat by the fire in the common room, her head on his shoulder, his arm around her. I've been thinking, he said quietly, about legitimate business, real estate, shipping, things that don't require blood. Could you do that? Walk away from that world? Not entirely. I know too much, have too many enemies, but I could step back, delegate more. Be something closer to the man you deserve. I don't want you to change for me, not for you. With you, he tilted her chin up. We both need to become something new. Neither nun nor mafia. Something unprecedented. What would that look like? I don't know, but we have time to figure it out. The fire crackled. Snow fell silent outside, and for the first time since that night, he'd stumbled into her convent. They both felt something approaching peace. Serafina stood before Mother Superior Beatrice in the rebuilt convent's garden. 6 months had passed since the fire, and new walls rose from old foundations. The elderly nun looked frailer but somehow fiercer, like suffering had refined rather than diminished her. You've come to resign your vows, Mother Superior said. It wasn't a question. I've come to seek your counsel. Serafina fingered the rosary she still carried. And your blessing, if you can give it. For a life with him? With the man whose world burned our home? He's rebuilding it. Every stone, every window. The new medical wing. Blood money cannot buy absolution, child. It's not blood money. He's liquidating legitimate assets, selling properties purchased legally. He's trying to buy your freedom from guilt? Mother Superior's eyes softened slightly. Or his own? Serafina was quiet for a moment, watching butterflies dance among the new roses. Maybe both, maybe neither. Maybe we're just two people trying to build something from ruins. Sit, Mother Superior commanded, gesturing to a stone bench. Tell me what your heart says. Not your mind, not your guilt, your heart. My heart says I was drowning before he came, that I took these vows not from devotion but from devastation. I was hiding here, Mother, not serving, playing a role I thought would save me from feeling anything again. And now? Now I feel everything. Terror, joy, desire, purpose. It's overwhelming and real and mine. With him, I'm not Sister Serafina performing piety. I'm just a self that loves a killer. A self that loves a man who kills to protect what he loves. There's a difference. Mother Superior was silent for a long time. Then she reached into her pocket, pulling out an envelope. This came for you. Serafina recognized Lysander's handwriting immediately. Inside was a single paragraph. I will wait at the cathedral in Marseille on the last day of this month. If you come, we leave everything behind your vows, my empire, our past. If you don't, I'll know your answer and never contact you again. Either way, you are free. L. He's giving you a choice, Mother Superior observed. He's giving me every choice. And what will you choose? Serafina stood, looking at the rebuilt convent, familiar yet fundamentally changed, like herself. I chose the moment I saved his life. Everything since has just been learning to admit it. Then why seek my blessing? Because you're the closest thing to a mother I have left. Because despite everything, what you think matters to me. The elderly nun rose, taking Serafina's hands. Child, I cannot bless what I don't understand, but I can bless you. You, who have walked through fire, literal and metaphorical. You, who have seen the worst humanity offers and still choose love. She squeezed gently. Go with grace, if not with God. Perhaps God is in this too, Serafina suggested. In the broken places where light gets in, perhaps. Mother Superior pulled her into an unexpected embrace. Be happy, child, in whatever form that takes. 3 days later, Serafina packed her few belongings. The sisters gathered to say goodbye, some with tears, others with silent judgment. Sister Margarita with a knowing smile. I always knew you were too wild for these walls, the elderly nun whispered. Fly, child. Fly far and don't look back. The journey to Marseille was a meditation in motion. With each mile, Serafina felt layers of the past falling away, the grief that had driven her to the convent, the fear that had kept her there, the guilt that had nearly destroyed her. She arrived at the cathedral as the sun was setting, painting the ancient stones gold. He was there, sitting in the last pew, wearing simple clothes she'd never seen him in jeans, a sweater, looking almost ordinary except for the way he carried himself, the danger that would always cling to him like cologne. He stood when he saw her, and she noticed his hands trembling slightly. This man who had faced down armies was nervous about her answer. You came, he said. Did you doubt? Every second. She walked to him slowly, savoring the moment. I don't even know where we'll go now. I bought a vineyard in New Zealand. Legitimate purchase, clean money, far from everything. He paused. We could build something new there, something that's just ours. No more violence? I can't promise that. If someone threatens you, then we face it together. She reached him, taking his hands. No more running, no more hiding. We choose each other, consequences and all. Even if those consequences damn us, then we'll be damned together. He pulled her into his arms, and she felt herself truly breathe for the first time in months. Around them, the cathedral bells began to ring, calling the faithful to evening prayer. But Serafina had found her own form of worship in the arms of a man who should have been her enemy but had become her salvation. I love you, she said, words she'd never spoken to him before. And I worship you, he replied. More than any god, more than any power. You are my religion now. As they left the cathedral together, Serafina didn't look back. She'd made her choice not between good and evil, but between a life half-lived and one burning with possibility. The vineyard sprawled across New Zealand's Waiheke Island like a secret garden, rows of vines running down to where the Pacific Ocean met the sky. 6 months had passed since Marseille. and Serafina barely recognized herself in the mirror sun-kissed skin, calloused hands from working the vines, eyes bright with something that had been missing for years. Joy. Lysander had kept his promise. Mostly. The violence was gone, replaced by the patient work of cultivation. He'd thrown himself into learning viticulture with the same intensity he'd once applied to warfare, studying soil conditions and grape varieties like they were battle plans. But the past has a way of finding you, even at the bottom of the world. "We have a problem," Dmitri announced, arriving unannounced on a Thursday morning, looking out of place in his Italian suit among the rustic scenery. Lysander didn't look up from the vine he was pruning. "I'm retired. The Corsini family is moving on your old territory. They're also spreading rumors about you, about her." Dmitri glanced at Serafina, who was collecting soil samples nearby. "They're saying you've gone soft, that the infamous Lysander Volkov is hiding in the colonies with his stolen nun. Let them talk. They're also saying she's your weakness, that anyone who wants to destroy you just needs to find her." Lysander's pruning shears went still. Serafina saw the old darkness flicker in his amber eyes. "How many know we're here?" "Too many." Word spreads. A Russian bratva boss running a vineyard with an ex-nun? It's too good a story not to tell. That night, they sat on the porch, watching the sunset. Glasses of their first vintage between them, rough but promising, like everything about their new life. "We could run again," Serafina offered. "No." His response was immediate. "No more running. We've done nothing wrong, except exist in defiance of everyone's expectations." He turned to her, and she saw decision crystallizing in his eyes. "Marry me." "What?" "Not in secret, not hidden. A real wedding, with announcements, guests, the entire world watching." He took her hand. "Let them all see that Lysander Volkov has chosen his queen. Let them understand that touching you means war with someone who has nothing left to lose but love. That's insane. That's protection. A public declaration that you're not some weakness to exploit. But my wife? Under my protection, and the protection of every alliance I still hold." She studied him, this man who'd gone from violence to vines, who read poetry while checking grape sugar levels, who still kept 3 loaded guns hidden around their peaceful home. "A real wedding means inviting your world, and yours. Whatever sisters will come. It means announcing to every enemy you've ever made exactly where to find us. It means declaring that I'm done hiding what you mean to me." He pulled her into his lap, holding her like she might evaporate. "I want the world to know that Serafina Volkov exists, that she's mine, and that I'll resurrect every violent skill I've ever learned to keep her safe." "Volkov? Not Calabrese?" "Unless you prefer—" "No." She kissed him softly. "Serafina Volkov sounds right. Sounds like who I was always meant to be." The wedding planning was surreal. Guest lists that included reformed sisters alongside reformed killers. Security arrangements that would make heads of state envious. A ceremony that somehow had to honor both the sacred and the profane. They chose the vineyard's main pavilion, overlooking the ocean. Sister Margarita agreed to come, along with 2 younger nuns who'd always been kind. From Lysander's world came Dmitri, of course, and a careful selection of allies, men who understood that this wedding was also a treaty, a declaration of new boundaries. The day itself dawned perfect clear skies, warm breeze, the sound of waves mixing with violin music. Serafina wore a simple white dress that made her look like what she was, a woman who'd chosen love over safety, truth over comfort. Lysander waited at the altar in a black suit, looking dangerous and beautiful, surrounded by men who'd once been killers and women who'd once been saints. Father Antonio, surprisingly, had agreed to officiate. "God's love is strange," he'd said when asked. "Who am I to say where it can't bloom?" As Serafina walked down the aisle, she saw the surreal mixture of their worlds: tattooed men crying genuine tears, elderly nuns smiling despite themselves, Dmitri standing as best man with a bulge under his jacket that was definitely a weapon. "We are gathered here," Father Antonio began, "in the sight of God and more security than most military installations, to witness something unprecedented." Nervous laughter rippled through the crowd. The vows were their own creation. "I, Lysander, take you, Serafina, knowing that you've seen my darkness and chosen to be my light." I promise to protect you with everything I am, to tend our vines with the same devotion I tend your heart, and to build a life where our pasts become fertilizer for our future. I, Seraphina, take you, Lysander, knowing that you've shown me wildness I never knew I craved. I promise to stand beside you through whatever storms come, to see the good in you when you can't see it yourself, and to make our home a sanctuary where killers can become gardeners and nuns can become wives. When Father Antonio pronounced them married, the kiss was tender but fierce, a claiming and a surrender all at once. The reception was equally surreal. Russian drinking songs mixed with hymns. Sister Margarita danced with Dmitri, who looked terrified of the tiny nun. Stories were shared that carefully avoided too many specifics about blood or bullets. As the sun set, Lysander stood to make a toast. The gathering fell silent. 6 years ago, I was dying, not from the bullet wound that was just flesh. I was dying from the inside, from the rot of a life built on violence. Then an angel in a habit saved me, and I learned that salvation comes in unexpected forms. He raised his glass to Seraphina. My wife has taught me that redemption isn't about erasing the past, but about choosing a different future. Today, before all of you, I choose her. And I warn anyone who would threaten our peace, I am retired, not reformed. Touch her, and I'll remind you why they once called me the Devil of Dubrovnik. The threat was delivered with a smile, but everyone understood its sincerity. Later, as they danced alone on the beach, Seraphina asked, "Do you think it will work, this public declaration?" "It doesn't matter," Lysander replied, spinning her under the stars. "Let them come. We've already won." "How?" "Because we're here, together. Everything else is just noise." 2 years late, the morning sun crept through the vineyard house windows, painting golden stripes across the bedroom where Seraphina woke to find Lysander already watching her, a habit he'd never broken, as if he still couldn't quite believe she was real. "You're staring again," she murmured, stretching against him. "I'm appreciating." His fingers traced the small scar on her shoulder, a reminder of the last time someone had been foolish enough to test them, 1 year ago. That man's organization no longer existed. Do you ever regret it? Which part? The marriage to an ex-mob boss? The vineyard that barely breaks even? The way the locals still whisper when we go to town? Any of it. All of it. She turned to face him fully, seeing new silver threads in his dark hair, the laugh lines that had slowly replaced the harsh angles of his face. "Never. Do you? Only that I didn't find you sooner." The sound of small feet on hardwood interrupted them. The door burst open, and their 3-year-old daughter climbed onto the bed, dark curls wild from sleep. "Papa! Mama! The grapes are talking again!" Lysander scooped her up, tickling her until she shrieked with laughter. "What are they saying, little warrior?" "They say today is special." Seraphina and Lysander exchanged glances over their daughter's head. Today was indeed special, the 2nd anniversary of their wedding, but also something more. After breakfast, while their daughter played in the garden under Dimitri's watchful eye, he'd moved to New Zealand permanently, claiming he was retired but still carrying 3 concealed weapons. Seraphina found Lysander in his study. "The letters came," he said, holding 2 envelopes. One bore the seal of the Vatican, her official release from her vows, finally processed after years of bureaucracy. The other was from the consortium of families that had once formed Lysander's criminal empire, formally acknowledging his retirement and granting him emeritus status, criminal speak for "leave him alone." "He's earned it. Free at last," she said, but there was no celebration in her voice. They'd been free since the moment they'd chosen each other. These were just papers catching up to reality. "There's one more thing." He pulled out a 3rd envelope. This one, from the local adoption agency. "We've been approved." Tears filled her eyes. After their daughter's difficult birth, the doctors had said another pregnancy would be dangerous, but their home had too much love for just one child. "When can we meet them?" "Tomorrow. 2 brothers, age 7 and 9. Their parents. Don't tell me how they lost them. Just tell me they need a home. They need a home. And maybe parents who understand that the world can be cruel, but love can be stronger." That afternoon, they walked through the vineyard, their daughter on Lysander's shoulders. pointing out birds and clouds with equal enthusiasm. The vines were heavy with grapes, ready for harvest, their best yield yet. "Remember when you couldn't tell a Cabernet from a carburetor?" Serafina teased. "Remember when you couldn't hold a gun without shaking?" "I still shake. I just shoot anyway now." They reached their favorite spot, a bench overlooking the ocean, where they'd shared their first kiss as husband and wife. Their daughter ran ahead, chasing butterflies with the fearlessness of someone who'd never known a world without love. "She'll need to know eventually," Serafina said, "about who we were, what we've done. She'll know that her father was a killer who learned to create instead of destroy, that her mother was a nun who chose love over safety." He pulled her close. "She'll know that redemption is possible, that people can change, that sometimes the most beautiful things grow from the darkest soil." Very poetic for a former mob boss. "You've been a terrible influence on me." As the sun began to set, Dimitri appeared with a picnic basket and a knowing smile. "The Corsini family sends their regards," he said, which was code for, "They're still too afraid to cause trouble." They spread a blanket on the grass, opening a bottle of their best vintage, the one they'd named Sanctuary, because that's what they'd built here. Their daughter fell asleep in Serafina's lap as the stars emerged, one by one, like promises kept. "I used to think love was weakness," Lysander said, his voice soft in the darkness, "something enemies could exploit. And now? Now I know it's the only strength that matters. Everything I was before you, the power, the fear, the respect, it was nothing. This is everything." Serafina leaned into him, feeling the solid warmth of his presence, the safety she'd never thought she'd find again after losing her family. "We did the impossible, didn't we?" "What's that?" "We found heaven in hell, grace in violence, God in the last place anyone would look for him. Blasphemous as always, my love. Honest as always, my heart." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars reflect on the ocean, their daughter breathing softly between them. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. The boys they'd adopt would need patience and love to heal from their trauma. The vineyard would need tending. The past would always lurk at the edges of their present. But tonight, they were complete. A former nun and a retired killer, bound by choices that should have destroyed them but had instead forged something unbreakable. They'd written their own scripture in blood and wine, prayers and bullets, creating a testament to the truth that love, real, dangerous, transformative love, could indeed conquer all. As they carried their sleeping daughter back to the house, Serafina paused at the threshold, looking back at the vineyard that had become their kingdom. "No regrets?" Lysander asked once more, a ritual between them now. "Only one," she said, and his eyebrows rose in surprise. "I wish everyone could know what we know, that sometimes the wrong choice is the only right one, and that salvation comes disguised as damnation." "Careful, sister. That sounds like wisdom." "Ex-sister," she corrected, pulling him inside. "Now I'm just Serafina Volkov, wife, mother, and grower of exceptional grapes, and destroyer of mob bosses' hearts. That too." They closed the door on the night, on the past, on everything but the present moment. In their bedroom, after checking on their daughter one more time, they came together with the passion that 2 years hadn't dimmed, but had instead refined into something deeper. "I love you," she whispered against his scarred skin. "Until death," he replied. "Beyond death," she corrected, and meant it. And in a house built on impossible love, surrounded by vines that grew from blood-soaked soil into something beautiful, they proved once again that sometimes the most sacred things are born from the most profane beginnings. The story that had started with a wounded man stumbling into a convent had become legend, whispered in criminal circles and religious ones alike. The nun who tamed the devil, the killer who found God in a woman's eyes. The love that shouldn't exist but did, defiant and eternal. But to them, it was simpler than legend. It was just their life, their choice, their ever after, and it was perfect.